Hey everyone, welcome back to the Sports Psych Show. Thanks so much for joining me. Now, today's guest is basketball coach Carly Clarke. So, where do I start with Carly? Well, she had a successful college playing career at Bishop's University, which then led to an assistant coaching role at Dalhousie. She then took up her first head coaching role at the University of Prince Edward Island, and then she moved on to the Ryerson Rams in 2012, and she's been running that program, very successful program, since that time. She's been the head coach of the women's under-19s national team, and she was head coach when they won their first ever medal at a World Cup, which was a bronze medal in 2017. And she's now the Canadian Senior Women's National Team Assistant Coach. Carly, thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to the Sports Psych Show.
Thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Well, I'm going to start in the present day. I'm going to start with your team mantra, because I think it's fascinating. Your team mantra has nothing to do with the X's and the O's in many respects, not in a direct way. It doesn't mention the tech or the tactical sides of the game. Your mantra is champion's mindset. So at Ryerson, you're focused on a champion's mindset. Why is that, Carly? Why is that mantra to do with the psychology of the game is to do with a champion's mindset?
Yeah, well, that's an idea we came up with about 6 years ago when we were kind of redirecting our team culture and trying to take our program to another level. And it's a concept that I believe in, my personal philosophy and my approach to day-to-day life and how I want to grow and get better. But the idea behind it is really that we want to approach everything that we do, whether it's training, school, anything in between, we approach that as if we're champions and with a champion behavior. So we really believe that if we want to achieve success at the end of our season or whatever goal we set out to do, that we approach it with the proper behaviors and habits and processes and trust that is going to guide us towards our goal.
You use this term behavior and you use this term habit. So in your mind, what behaviours do you want to see? Because I think it's in college programs, in coaching programs, it's easy to talk about champions' behaviours. What specifically do you want to see in your athletes every single day?
Well, the list is probably long, but there's a few things that we believe that we can control every single day that when we show up to training or whatever we're doing. And the first two things are always our effort and our attitude. We always believe we can control our effort, and if everybody shows up with their best effort and an open mindset every single day, then the possibilities to get better are incredible. And then same with attitude. If you're not there being a great teammate, prepared to learn, willing to be coached, even body language, I think, fits into attitude and how you present yourself and how you interact, then you're not going to be able to achieve your best. Beyond that, I think there's behaviors and standards around, for us, passion and pride is a big thing, accountability and commitment. We talk about toughness, and I think there's a lot of different words these days that can be used to describe toughness in different ways, and togetherness is another big thing. So all of those things do fit into effort and attitude, but those are our 5 key guiding principles for us.
And so when you sit down at the beginning of a day and you're contemplating your coaching session, whether by yourself or with your coaching staff, are those the kind of key behaviours that you're bearing in mind when you think about the activities that you're delivering? Do you think in part that effort and attitude is driven by yourself as much as being the personal responsibility of the players as well?
I think that's something, effort in particular, that I've gone back and forth on. I think some athletes are prepared and have the competitive drive or intrinsic motivation every single day to bring their best effort. But I think as coaches, there is still a responsibility to get the best effort out of our players and to plan and to teach them what their best effort looks like. I think a lot of time in athletes and even in humans, we think we're giving our best, and there's often a lot more within us to give. And I think that's the role of a coach, is to help athletes, and in our case, student athletes, recognize that there's more in them for them to achieve.
I love what you said there. Teach what best effort looks like. It's that image, isn't it? It's that it's an inner picture as well as a feeling, an affect, an emotion. When you reflect back on your sessions, are there specific things that you do that enable players to unlock that best effort? Is it related to the type of activities you're doing, the co-coaching you're doing, the communication that you're delivering? What is it that you think unlocks that best effort? Because I love what you've said there. I go back and forth on, well, is it the player or is it me or is it both? It feels like a bit of both, doesn't it? For sure.
I think it's all of those things. I think we certainly tried to build things into our training where our athletes are pushed out of their comfort zone and challenged, and we try and mix up what we do. We try and not to do the same thing every single day, because that can become routine and comfortable. And we also try and coach through questioning and inquire what the athlete's experiencing and get them to build some self-awareness around what they're doing and what they're controlling and what they can change.
Fantastic. I think that coaching through questioning, let's explore that a little bit to stretch players. I mean, I always talk to coaches about having two dials, a stretch dial and a support dial, and it's about playing around with those dials to hit the sweet spot so you can help players grow. And I think questioning is something that's such a powerful weapon that coaches have in their toolbox, or a very powerful tool in their toolbox. But I'm also mindful, and this is a recurrent theme with my work with elite coaches, is on the one hand, you're trying to coach at a certain intensity because you want an intensity on the court or the pitch. And yet at the same time, as you said, you want to engage players and ask them questions. So when you're coaching on the run, are you mindful of when you should be asking questions, when perhaps you've got to be more directive, when to keep play going? How do you adopt that balance?
Yeah, I think that's another challenging one that's a big question out there right now, and a lot of people are experimenting with. I think as coaches, we all love to have control, and I think we're all fighting to give that up, or hopefully we are, because ultimately the players have to play the game. So there's always a balance. I think the thing that we're really trying to do now is give very clear expectations on what we're working on. So that doesn't mean that when we're doing a drill, we're only working on rebounding. We might be playing full court 5-on-5, working on a zone press or press break, but rebounding might be an emphasis within that whole up and down transition scenario. So then there's reminders on the run, but there might also be scoring system related to rebounding. There might be stoppages related to the execution and a quick check-in. Okay, freeze. How were our box outs? Did we pursue an offensive rebound there? A quick check-in, and the players could say yes or no, and then you go right back at it. So it's trying to build, not just isolate skills necessarily that you need to work on, but build them into those competitive environments. So it's built into a game-like scenario, but they're also having to focus and bring awareness to whatever those 1, 2, or 3 points of emphasis are.
And I love what you said there in terms of it starts with clear expectations. So it sounds to me like at the beginning of the session, you're laying the ground for those expectations. You're building clarity of this is what we're working on today. But within that box of what you're working on, you might gamify it, so there will be a scoring system. You might be directive at a certain stage or at a certain time. This is what I'm seeing, this is what I want. You might be non-directive in as much as you might stop and ask questions and get the players to appraise where they are. So there's a mix of directive and non-directive, but it comes back to those clear expectations. This is what we're doing.
Exactly. I think, as coaches, we get watching the game, and I know I've been guilty of this a lot, where you start to see other things that you didn't lay out in your expectations, and it's easy to get drawn towards, now we're not doing that, and that. And I think laying out that plan both for yourself and for your athletes to be able to narrow your focus and really hone in on what you want to improve and train in that moment is really important.
And I think in that respect, coaching can be a box of surprises, because I'm thinking about, bringing this back to the psychology of coaching, the capacity to be adaptable, flexible, and stickable, if that makes sense. So listening to what you're saying there, Carly, what I hear you saying is that as the activity unfolds, there can be things that unfold that can be quite surprising to you. But you've got to make a very quick decision as a coach, haven't you? You've either got to stick with what you're doing, or maybe even at times you've got to adapt to that, and you've got to say, okay, well, it's going down this path. I've got to say something about this. I've got to work on this.
Absolutely. I think that's the art in coaching all the time is trying to pick out what those things are. And I think if you develop a good plan in advance, it's easy to adapt and adjust or stick to it, like you said. But if the players are unsure of what the expectations are, and even if you as a coach are not clear on exactly what you're trying to get out of a drill or a training session, then it's harder to do all of those things.
When those activities are going on, what are you looking at? And is that different to what you're looking for? Are you looking for something specific? Are you looking at something specific?
Well, there's a lot to look at specifically in a training session, but I think first and foremost, going back to the effort and attitude things that we talked about early on, I think I'm always looking for that and making sure that we're meeting our standards in effort and attitude. Body language, eye contact are all big things for me in terms of readiness to train. But then I think, within specific drills, you try and shift your eyes, or specific segments of practice, you shift a little bit in what you're really looking at, and based on those expectations or points of emphasis within that segment of the training session.
So here's a question for you. Let's take 2010, you were at the University of Prince Edward Island. Would you have been looking at something different then, 9 years ago, as compared to now? Do you look at something different now based on your experience? Absolutely.
Well, I say absolutely, and then I think about reneging on that and say yes and no. As a coach, I think when I finished playing and was transitioning into coaching, I remember my coach said to me, "You don't know how much you don't know." Yeah. And every year I coach, I discover that more and more and more. And I think it gets more challenging to narrow down exactly what I want, not trying to do everything, which things are most important, because you can't do everything in a season or in a training session. As much as coaches, I think we want to try and fit it all in. We have to narrow and figure out what those most important things are. So when I started at the University of Prince Edward Island, our program was in a complete rebuild. And at that point, without having the term champions mindset, we were certainly living that, because we weren't going to win a lot of games at that point. So our training really became about the process and making sure that we were finding ways to measure success beyond the scoreboard. And I remember in my first or second season there, a coach on a team in our conference said to me, "You're the best boxing out team I've ever seen or we've ever played against." And to me, that was feedback for our team. That was success for us. Because we weren't going to beat them. They were the best team in the conference, but they recognized how tough we were to rebound against. But in saying all that, I think a lot of things still are the same, and the experiences that I had at UPEI and understanding how important finding wins were every single day in our training and different parts throughout competition to achieve success, that really helps drive our current philosophy and how I coach with Ryerson. I think when a culture is established and hopefully the players are driving the effort and attitude on a daily basis, as a coach, now you can change a little bit what you're looking at, and you can focus a little bit more on the technical and tactical piece because you trust your leadership and your coaching staff and the people in the environment to hopefully drive the culture with you. Whereas when I started, I was doing that by myself.
I like what you said there. The players are driving the effort and the attitude, and as you're alluding to there, that frees you up to do the stuff that you have to do as a coach. How did you start that process of players driving effort and attitude? What things did you do? What did you put in place? Was that getting players in a room and creating a leadership group? What did you do to get them accountable?
I think we've done a lot of different things. Certainly, leadership group has been part of our process and continues to be part of our process. I think it's really important to have that two-way communication, coach to player and player to coach. But for me, every season, it really starts with our team in a room. And as you're with a program for 6 and 7 years, like I have been now, certain standards become inherited and passed on, and being on time and wearing your practice gear and those things just become known. But I think year to year, you have to sit down. You don't have to. I choose to sit down with our athletes and discuss what they think is important and give them some ownership in those standards and expectations. So, for us, being on time and team gear are things that we just do. This year we discussed cell phones and what we do with those, and the team made an agreement that when we're at team dinner, no one has their cell phone on the table or visible, and we interact. And then that way the athletes have the ownership of those standards, and now they're in charge, and so is the staff, to make sure if someone, if a coach pulls their phone out, a player has the freedom to say, "Hey coach, put your phone away." And so there's ownership throughout everybody, and it's not just top down in whatever those standards are. And those things happen on the floor too, not just off the floor.
It's not just top down, so do you feel there's an element of bravery from a coach to flatten that power triangle, if you like, that it does require, I don't know if bravery is the right word, open-mindedness as a coach to say, look, you know what, my leadership is more servant leadership here. I'm actually holding the players up. I'm there to serve the players. Is that your picture of leadership as a coach?
Yeah, that's definitely a huge part of it. I think as a coach, it also demonstrates trust. And I think the most successful environments are trusting ones that have player to coach and player to player and coach to player relationships that are strong enough. I think also as a coach, when you're having those conversations and setting standards and expectations and team principles, you're still driving them in a certain direction, right? And steering them. And we certainly have pictures in our mind of what we would like, but it's important that the players are bought into them. If they don't believe in those as important things to success, then they're never going to help drive those things forward.
And some of those behaviours you mentioned were more off the court, the cell phone, turning up with the right kit, etc., being on time. In your team, are there on-court standards related to play, related to attitude that the players set, or do you principally set those?
It's been a combination.
Yep.
I think mostly behaviors around our team connectedness and togetherness. That's a really important part of our team culture. So we run off and run on the floor when we substitute. When one of our players falls on the ground and there's a whistle, all 4 players run and help them up. We huddle on dead balls. We deliver eye contact to each other when we're speaking. We high-five everybody when we sub. So those are lots of ones geared around our team being connected and together and communicating. We certainly have a lot of communication standards in basketball. Communication is, you can't be successful if you don't communicate in a variety of different ways. And then just how we play the game. And for us, it's about moving the ball and sharing the ball and being unselfish and having each other's back. Now, there's some specifics in what that looks like, but those can shift a little bit year to year or team to team.
Why do you win and why do you lose? When you've won, what are the main things that have helped you to win? When you've lost, what's been the difference?
I think a lot of the things that we've just talked about together lead to success and winning. Mm-hmm. Talent obviously is certainly a part of that, but that talent playing together and playing for each other, I think is really important to success. And then sheer effort. You have to be willing to compete if you want to win. And it comes down to lots of little plays that lead to winning. I think, certainly for our team this year, when we didn't win, we did not play together. We did not have an effort to match our opponent. And I think the other big thing is just our mental approach and what happens when mistake happens. We have a team that at times can get internal or can develop negative self-talk and isolate a little bit. So if we're not connected and sharing and communicating, that often led to loss. Does for a lot of teams.
Yeah, that's really interesting you say that. So negative thoughts, so individual negative thoughts impacts team cohesion on the court, is essentially what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, basketball is a game, I say this all the time, that it's an incredible game because it's full of mistakes. And I think the most successful teams are ones that can park their mistakes, move on, and be in the next play immediately, because it's literally seconds that you have to recover and get back on defense or move on from a foul or a turnover. And if there's 5 players on the floor at a time that are always interconnected, and if you isolate yourself or take yourself out of a play, that can throw off the whole rhythm of the entire team out there.
So what I hear you say is individual negative thinking can damage focus of attention. So they're thinking about past mistakes, they're focused on maybe how long there is to go or the mistakes of teammates, and so it destroys togetherness. So there's a real link between those. And so in your coaching practice, what are there specific strategies you might use with your team or with individuals to help them overcome that? Or is it more of just a general conversation about being focused? How do you deal with those challenges?
Yeah, I think self-talk is a really important one. At the university level, we're coaching 17 to 25-year-old women that tend to be pretty critical and self-deprecating, often at times, just based in society and social norms and all of those things. So, to instill confidence and positive self-talk, outside or externally is a challenge to begin with at that age group. So when mistakes happen, it's really easy to get inside your head and question yourself. Certainly, that's something that happens with a lot of our players. So, we try and work on those things and how we talk to ourselves and bring awareness when we hear positive self-talk, but bring awareness when we hear negative self-talk as well. And, try and build those habits. I think self-awareness overall is really important. And having teammates and be able to hold each other accountable to that, not just staff, is important too. But sometimes that's hard for players when their confidence is fragile. It's an interesting thing to tackle sometimes with this age group. There's other things that are like centered breathing, just to help bring you back to the present. We have a couple key terms. We talk about next play a lot, or playing present. When we're managing any type of distraction and being focused on the play that's in front of us and just that play.
Yeah. So in essence, you yourself have brought a knowledge, a passion, a battery of tools and techniques to your team to be able to help them play present, stay focused, play with confidence. And confidence is an interesting one, isn't it? Do you feel that confidence is built on the practice court more so than in any other environment? Do you feel that your practice sessions are the things that build player confidence?
I think ideally, yes. I think there's so many external distractions now that impact confidence, whether it's fans or social media and different comments or conversations that might happen. But we really believe that your preparation and practice is where you gain your confidence and your readiness.
What does confidence look like to you?
I think it goes back to, again, some of the things I talked about at the beginning, but for us, body language, eye contact, all of those things kind of display certainty and trust. I think, going back to some of the mistakes things, confidence looks like moving on from a mistake and not wallowing in it, being able to move forward, being able to try something again, and being able to encourage the people around you too.
It's very interesting as you're describing confidence there. For me, confidence is such an embodied thing. It's a bodily thing, and I can think of action-based words that would describe confidence, such as alert, alive, lively, energetic, on your toes. I've always, when I've worked with players, spoken to them about, as you say, body language, but the specifics of body language. I think that in sport, we throw this term body language out there and we use it all the time. But when you really get down to it, when you really get down to the nitty-gritty, confidence is body language, but it's taking charge of your body rather than letting your body take charge of you, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. That's a great description.
It's something that I'm talking with athletes all about in terms of setting that as an objective. That's to me a really important objective for an athlete is to use my body, to drive my body language, to drive my game, and having that kind of equation. And it's interesting because I come back in 2012 when you took over at Ryerson, and you spoke about we had to set up our own indices of success rather than outcome being success. Actually, it was how you defended, or what your offense was like, or something specific within that. And I'm showing my naivety about basketball here, but something specific, a controllable, specific play. And I always talk to athletes about actually having objectives around the mental side of the game. And if they have that, those are things that they can control, and those can be indices of success.
Absolutely. I think, having those things outlined in every aspect of the game are so important in building your platforms for success. We talk about it mentally, technically, tactically, strength and conditioning wise, academics, all of those things impact success overall. And I think we often, in the mental side of things, I think it's growing in how we look at it that way, and setting those objectives and processes for improving that side of the game, but it's still not to the level of what we do technically and tactically, but it's as or more important to success.
With that in mind, putting you on the spot here, apologies, but what would that look like? What does better look like from the mental side of the game in terms of perhaps what we provide as sports psychologists, or what you can provide as a coach?
I think I was going to say it might be a little bit individualistic. I know with our national team program, just as we would set an individual improvement plan for an athlete to work on their shooting or their ball handling or passing, we're going to set out a similar plan for the players in the mental side of the game. So for one player, that might be body language overall and eye contact. For another player, it might be their response to a mistake. Another player, it could be their communication. I think there's an endless list, or self-talk, or all of those things I think can impact, in different ways, but it might be an individual plan. And then, like for us, we talked about our togetherness and our connectedness being so important for our team. We measure that, and we've actually measured that in the past by, we call a hockey assist the assist that leads to the assist, and we've measured that as a concept of togetherness, but we've also measured team huddles when we get 5 out of 5 or a point or a high five or different things that you can measure, or at least visually observe, to show that we're growing.
Absolutely. I really love that, Carly, because as you say, it's the challenge you have in sports psychology, other than psychometric tests, that people have mixed feelings about those, taking them into a sports environment with athletes, especially young athletes, because they feel they're being judged and they're doing this tick box thing that feels far removed. But that idea of, well, you're measuring objectively, how many high fives, how many huddles. I think from a subjective perspective, you can measure it. I'm always asking players, give me a mark out of 10 for your mindset in that game. What do you give yourself? Okay, you give yourself 7. What would 9 look like? What would better look like? So there are ways to measure it, aren't there? Absolutely.
I think that reflection post-training, post-game is critical to build self-awareness, because otherwise athletes will just move on. And even if you don't measure some of those things we just talked about, film now is such a great tool for showing athletes what things look like, especially, and can be observed mentally a lot.
Hugely, because in many respects, mindset is seen through behaviour, and performance can be defined as behaviour. And when players hide, when they're slightly slower to fill space or get on the ball, get into position, there's potential evidence there that mentally they're not quite on it, they're not playing present.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Just going back to briefly back to the coaching piece and back to winning and losing. You've won. What's the first thing you say? First few things you say in that changing room after you've won?
Well, I always high five our whole team. That's become part of our routine, and we always want to make sure that we celebrate when we win. I think as a coach, and there was a small period where we were so focused on the process that, if the process wasn't great and we still won, we maybe skipped the celebration piece. But I think it's important to always celebrate your victories together and recognize that you've done something successfully if you've won a game. So that's a big thing that we try and hone in on. And then for us, post game we'll question. I always walk into the locker room and get input from the players first. And they often have the right things to say, and we have very little to add after that, because we've got our game objectives on the board, and they're good at reflecting on how we did with those objectives and expectations, and finding things and talking about areas that we did well and areas we need to improve moving forward.
I like the way you said there that you get the players involved straight away, just getting their opinion, their viewpoint, because obviously being able to see the world through their eyes is so important. And now let's flip that. I know it sounds quite negative, but it's just interesting to get a feel and some insight for this. When you've lost, what's the first couple of things that you might do or say?
The process is very similar. Obviously, no celebration, but still get their feedback on how they're feeling, what they're thinking, in relation to the goals and expectations we set out for the game, and really evaluating our process. And I'm a big believer. I'm as competitive as they get, and I want to win every game. But going back to the champion's mindset, there's going to be times where you play your best and you put your best effort forward and you might still lose. So we're often trying to measure ourselves against ourselves, learn things from the opponent and what they do well and things that we can take away and move forward to take those things to get better. And
when you lose or are in the process of losing, I mean, coaches are human beings, and as you say, coaches are coaches because they're competitive creatures by and large. Obviously, coaching at younger age levels is very different. It's very much more participative, or you'd like to think it is. But certainly at the college level, you're there to win. So, as a coach, managing your own emotions, Carly, is there anything you specifically do to help yourself manage your emotions?
Definitely. I think my emotions probably get most heated with the officials or in big moments in big games. This hasn't actually happened yet, but with our national team, we wear some heart rate monitors in training, and we've talked about doing that with coaches just to monitor our peaks and our moments and how we respond to those. But I think I have great self-awareness and try and hone in on that when my emotions are getting riled up with the officials as the easiest example probably. But I do some centered breathing. I've got a checklist and a ready sheet in my pocket that I'll refer back to as a bit of a reset or a refocus or being able to move on or just sit next to my assistant coaches and we've developed a strong relationship now where they have a good sense of what I need and can bring me back to the present as well.
Do you think there's a place for showing a bit of passion? So as we're speaking now, there's been an infamous incident in the last couple of weeks with a fairly prominent college basketball coach. And there's been people who have stood up for him and others who have said, no, this isn't the way to coach in the modern day. I won't put you on the spot and ask you to comment on a particular situation, but I suppose it relates to, is there a place for the emotion of anger to change behaviour, manipulate behaviour, or to improve performance in your space? I
definitely believe there's emotion, and the use of emotion can help drive behavior when necessary in players. I'll never forget when I was a 12-year-old on a provincial team, and one of my first ever and best coaches I've had sat us down and in a timeout in a big game, and I think it was 14, not 12, but started to get after us a little bit, and then she just went, we just got to relax. And, she used that shift of emotion as, such a pivotal moment to be like, yeah, we do. And I think, that's so important in coaching. I think passion in particular, your players have to know and see that in order to play with passion as well. And that's definitely a driver for me. I think anger to me signals loss of control. So actually being angry to me is not the same as using emotion. I really believe in being direct and assertive, and to me that is a little bit different than angry in coaching. So not sure if that's a really clear answer, but that's how I would view it. I think as a coach, it's important when you're addressing your players that you are in control, and you can still adjust your behavior and your approach and your language and your demeanor to drive some change.
No, I think it is very clear. I love what you say there in terms of emotion is positive, it's adaptive, as long as it retains a sense of control. I think is what you're saying would be a fair summary.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. So in terms of your own growth, Carly, I know you're passionate about developing yourself. What's next for you in terms of your own growth? Are there specific things out there that you're striving to find out about? Is it whatever comes your way comes your way? How are you looking to improve yourself?
Great question. Probably have to narrow that focus a little bit, but I think the biggest one that is a constant for me is communication with athletes and players. And I remember hearing a coach with our national team a few years ago say, no matter how much you communicate, the players are always going to want more. And I think that shows true more and more every season and every week that I coach. So finding ways to continue to most importantly make sure the athletes have a clear picture of what you expect, what their role is, and how to drive those things forward. And I'm certainly passionate about the leadership side of things and the culture side of things, and athletes owning their environment and continuing to move culture forward, because I think that's just such a critical piece to success. Basketball is an incredible game because it's constantly evolving and changing, and internationally the rules shift marginally year to year, but it's such a fun, exciting game, and there's just endless opportunities to learn. So the last year and a half I've had more exposure to the professional level, whereas I've coached the collegiate and junior age a little bit more. So working with professionals and how to bring that back to the college environment and vice versa are areas that I'm loving to explore right now as well.
Fascinating. Brilliant. Well, look, thank you so much, and I really enjoyed listening to your take on coaching. I've written a few pages of notes there. Now, I know you're reasonably active on Twitter. What's your handle, and how can people find you?
Yeah, Twitter's probably the best way. Yep. Carly_Clarke on Twitter. Lots of retweets of great stuff, and hopefully a little bit of my own content to share with everybody, and love connecting with people around the world. It's a great platform to learn and share, and would love to hear from anybody.
Fantastic. Well, Carly Clarke, thank you so much for your time today. That was brilliant, and I hope you, the listener, enjoyed that podcast. If you did, I'd really like to know what you think. Please do in touch via Twitter or Facebook or through my website, danabrahams.com, to tell me what you think of the show. Be honest, be open, and provide any suggestions. I'll be delighted to hear them. I'm really looking forward to next week's show. Bye for now.